All right, this is a Unit 2 review. Let's talk about the different concepts that were mentioned in Unit 2. The first is lines. You should be able to identify lines. Lines are straight. Lines have arrows on each end. That tells you that lines go on forever. These are all lines. These are line segments. Segment tells you that it's part of a line, so you should notice that it has two endpoints. Each line segment has two endpoints to tell you that it stops. They're not like lines, they don't go on forever. They represent a part of a line. They have endpoints. They stop. These are rays. Rays have one endpoint, and they have one line, and they have one arrow that shows that the line goes on. So it stops on one side, and it goes on the other, just like a line would. The next components in Unit 2 were parallel, intersecting, and perpendicular. Parallel lines go on forever, and they never touch. They would keep going on because they're lines, but they're parallel because they never touch one another. You can also have parallel line segments, and they would have dots on either end. Those would be line segments because they have dots, but parallel means that they go on forever without touching. Intersecting lines cross one another. It just means that they cross. They can cross any number of ways. It can even be like this where they're going to cross because they're lines and they go on forever. You can also have intersecting line segments. They also cross, but because they're line segments, they would have dots at either end. Perpendicular lines are very special intersecting lines. These lines intersect, but not only do they intersect, but they have square corners. So you can stick a little square right in that space. Intersecting lines have 4 square corners. And there are lots of shapes that have square corners and lots of shapes that meet at perpendicular angles. Chapter 2 also discussed different shapes. We focused on quadrilaterals. Quad means 4. Quadrilaterals have 4 sides. Lat means sides. Quadrilaterals have 4 sides. Notice all of these shapes on this entire page have 4 sides. They are all quadrilaterals. 4 sides. We also learned about 2 different types of sides, and those are opposite sides and adjacent sides. Opposite sides are opposite one another, like these 2 sides. This side here is opposite this side. This side here is opposite this side. Adjacent sides are sides that are touching. Those are adjacent sides there. There are adjacent sides. They meet one another. They touch at corners. Those are adjacent sides. All of these shapes have opposite sides, and they have adjacent sides because they all have 4 sides. 2 sides are 2 pairs of opposite sides, and then they have adjacent sides, 4 pairs of adjacent sides. Now, there are special types of quadrilaterals, like these 2 shapes right here, and these are parallelograms. They are parallelograms because their opposite sides are parallel. Remember, we said that parallel sides or parallel lines never touch one another. Well, these have opposite sides that are parallel. Notice, these two sides will never touch one another. These two sides will never touch one another. Same goes here. These opposite sides are parallel. If they were to go on forever, they would never, ever, ever cross one another. These two sides are parallel. If they were to go on forever and ever, they would never touch. Do you see here? If we had these sides, they would cross one another. Those are not parallel because they would cross one another at some point. Parallelograms have opposite sides that are parallel. Opposite sides that are parallel. They will never touch. Now, there are some very special types of parallelograms, and those are called rectangles. Rectangles are quadrilaterals because they have four sides, just like every shape on this page. They're also parallelograms because just like in the traditional parallelograms, rectangles have opposite sides that are parallel. Rectangles are even more special though because rectangles have four square corners. These are corners that meet at perpendicular angles. There are four square corners. And this is what makes them rectangles. Parallelograms, they don't have square corners. These would not fit in there evenly. Those are not square corners. Rectangles are rectangles because they have four sides. They're parallelograms. They have opposite sides that are parallel. And they have four square corners. This is also a rectangle because it has opposite sides that are parallel. It has square corners. And it looks just like this one, only it's a little bit skinnier. This, however, is a special type of rectangle because it is a square. Now, just like a parallelogram and just like a rectangle, opposite sides are parallel. So that means that a square is a quadrilateral because it has four sides. A square is a parallelogram because opposite sides are parallel. A square is a rectangle because it has square corners. But what makes a square really unique is that a square's sides are all the same length. So a square is a quadrilateral, it is a parallelogram, it is a rectangle. And because all four sides are the same length, it is a square. It is a square. I'm going to show you another neat trick. There's another shape that you might not have heard of before. And we're going to just take one of these shapes and turn it into this other shape. And that shape looks like this. This shape is called a rhombus. A rhombus is a parallelogram. It has opposite sides that are parallel. They will never touch. But a rhombus is not a rectangle because it doesn't have square corners. Notice those squares don't fit in there. However, Can you tell what a rhombus does have? A rhombus is unique too. It's not a square because, again, it doesn't have those square corners. However, just like a square, a rhombus has 4 sides that are all the same length. So a rhombus is a parallelogram, and a rhombus has all 4 sides that are the same length, but because it doesn't have square corners, a rhombus can't be a rectangle, and a rhombus cannot be a square. All right. Hopefully that was a nice review for Unit 2. Good luck.